Marlene, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining today.
Thanks, Bogdan. Thanks for having me.
No, of course. Listen, we talked a little bit before recording, and you know, I cannot speak highly of you enough because, like, of what you were doing before, you know, of your past experience being a physio on the WTA, working for Tennis Canada for many years, and I want to ask you a very simple question because I work with a lot of parents, you know, and they have their kids, they play tennis, and that's all fun. At what age is it okay for a child to see a physio? Just like to do like a regular checkup. If nothing hurts, everything's great, but at what age is it normal to see a physiotherapist?
Well, my guidelines would be realizing that for many, many years, probably 15, 20 years, I worked with Tennis Canada's U12 program. And the kids in that program were anywhere between 9 and 12 years old. It was rare to have a 9-year-old. They were mainly between 10 and 12. Mm-hmm. And I've been asked this question at seminars before. And basically it comes down to when you have high-performing kids, so not your maybe average weekend athlete, but someone who's high-performing, meaning they're obviously training at a serious level, they're training intensely, they're training generally a lot of hours, often too many hours. They might have a fitness coach, so they're doing fitness, and they may be doing other sports on the side. In that age category, 10 to 12, it would not be uncommon for a child that age to see a physiotherapist who could maybe do a screening evaluation and look at them in terms of, you know, their balance of flexibility, strength, stability, that type of stuff. And that gives us a lot of information going forward in terms of injury prevention. If they happen to be injured, if a child does sustain an injury, that my guideline is always like they have pain for 2 to 3 days that is not changing despite maybe efforts and suggestions that they've been given from their coaches or fitness coaches, then they should seek medical help to make sure it's not something related to a growth type specific injury in a child.
Okay. If we're talking about that age category, like 9 to 12, what are the most common injuries that you see in kids, especially tennis players?
I think the most common ones are you know, there's a lot of like little pulled muscles, you know, some, you know, just general kind of muscle fatigue, like a DOMS, which we call delayed onset muscle soreness, which is a normal type of soreness to have after training and that. But age specific, we do see things that are pediatric type injuries that are related to growth plates and stuff like that. So heel pain that gets diagnosed as Achilles tendonitis or plantar fasciitis is something that should be looked into because it's related to growth and a lot of the running and pounding. Knee pain, the same thing, growth plates in the knee and early signs of tendonitis and stuff like that. So there are some specific things. They're a little young at that age still to get too much of that. I think generally you're looking more towards the 12-year-old plus. But in the very young ones, like 9, 10, it wasn't unusual for me to see things just related to probably just too much training. Sore muscles, pulled muscles, some tendon fatigue and tenderness, that type of stuff.
So simply by overtraining, by doing more than they should, and we all know the numbers based on LTAD that, you know, like a child should train, like they can develop injuries. So if they were to follow a little bit more stricter, maybe those guidelines, they could avoid injuries, avoid seeing, you know, physio and stay healthy longer. Is that what you're saying pretty much?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of the things you see, or I saw, I shouldn't talk for every physio, but certainly having worked in this age category for a long time, were nearly always related to just too much load, which meant too much training or too intensive training, even in a couple of days in a row type thing. And one of the other ones I saw actually in a couple of 12-year-olds is what you see in baseball players as well, young pitchers and baseball players, and that's like a little league elbow where they get a pretty bad tendonitis in their elbow. And you see this in the tennis players from too much serving, too much load in serving. And it often gets misdiagnosed when they're taken to people that aren't maybe sport-specific doctors or therapists as just a tendonitis, and the load isn't adjusted properly. And that can be very, very serious because it is a growth plate type of injury. And any of those kids I saw that were 12, 13 with this type of elbow pain, we usually pulled them out for an extensive period of time, like minimum 6 weeks. It was often maybe 10 or 12 weeks, and parents don't like that.
Yeah, so that's what I actually wanted to ask you next. Like, how do you, I don't want to say the word sell, but how do you speak to parents in order for them to really start understanding, okay, hey, like your 9-year-old, he's 9, he has like certain, capacity that he can withstand. Like he cannot just go and like have like a part-time job on a tennis court, working 20 hours a week. So how do you explain that to parents?
Well, I was in, again, this perfect scenario because, I'm working for an organization. I have tons of experience. So I garnered a certain amount of respect to begin with these parents. And a lot of these kids I would see in camp situations. And so in those camp situations, I'd have these kids for days on end, and we would meet with the parents as a group and individually. Or I had an office at Tennis Canada where I would see some of these athletes and evaluate them and treat them. And it all came down to really just spending some good time with the parents and really educating them. And I think I was able to do that because of, my resume and my experience. I was really able to sit down and make clear to them what the pros and cons were to this type of training. And it was also like I didn't have to sell them to, okay, you've come into my practice and I'm telling you all this because now I want your child to come and see me for 10, 20 treatments. So it never was like a push to financially have these kids under my control. It was, and that sometimes is a factor, taking your kids into different practitioners, that there could be a little bit of a hard sell on treatment. When it could be necessary, it might not be necessary. So it really comes down to all the time is being able to educate these parents as best you can. Tennis Canada did a great job at really supporting the sports medical staff. So we often had parent seminars that were mandatory for the parents to attend, and so they had to sit and listen to what we had to say. And then out of that always came, like, the parent would be like, can I talk to you later? Can I bring my child to see you? Can I get more information? So it really was education.
Yeah, I think it's also important that, the same message is coming from a coach, and if it's the same message from a physio and then the same message from a fitness coach, and then the parent starts to understand that, like, it's not just one person that wants me to do this. It's like this is really the way. Yeah. And it just becomes easier, in the end, for a child to progress and do things that all parents want them to do in the end.
And again, because you worked for Tennis Canada for many years, I mean, the majority of coaches that I was constantly in contact with and working with their students were coaches like yourself that were in the Tennis Canada system, that I knew how they were coming through the system as coaches and what they were exposed to in their coaching education system. And we did work as a team. And I don't think I can really think of any coach that ever, they would question, but they would never really doubt your expertise. And the same with me with the coaches. And so it was really important for us to be on the same page. And when they weren't on the same page, then we talked about it. And I thought the scenario we had there was excellent in terms of the training for the kids.
I agree. That was definitely a great environment. I learned a ton from you, like when I was no, really, like, because I mean I wasn't really working with you a lot in terms of, like, you know, we worked in the same period, but I wasn't really like in your office, you know, like, but I would sometimes, you know, like I would pop in and I would ask you some questions, and like the things that you mentioned, like what fascinated me, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that more in detail, how we would do like our annual testing, you know, like we would do like the blood work, we would do like physio assessment, fitness assessment, but from the physio standpoint, how we would evaluate a player, you know, like that young 12-year-old, 11-year-old player, and you would incorporate certain exercises for them to have during the warm-up. So can you just speak a little bit about things that kids could do on a regular basis that could help them become, you know, help them prevent injury? So like things that you would include in the warm-up, like things that you would, you know, maybe do after practice.
Yeah, the first part of my evaluation I did with every level of player, but really started to try and ingrain it at that young age, was a very thorough postural assessment with these kids.
Yes.
Because posture is a big thing.
Let me fix my
Because
posture.
we both sit
Real
up
quick
straight.
Here. Let me pinch that toonie, I remember.
Pinch that toonie. And so that was something I really hammered home with the young kids from very early ages, is what were the proper postures of life, what were the proper postures that were required in tennis to be the most efficient, and then from there, what were some simple exercises that they could work on throughout their day. It wouldn't even just be, oh, you can only do these at the court. They had to be implemented. And as you just brought up, the pinch the toonie one was one of my favorites, and kids never, ever forgot that, because it's so simple, and you can do it anywhere, anytime, and it's just the starting base exercise for really being able to promote open, erect posture.
Yeah. Yeah,
and you're probably wondering, what is that exercise?
You can elaborate a little bit.
Well, yeah, because I think any kid or coach I ever worked with knows what it is. But you know, so many of us, even in jobs like this, we're sitting and we're slumped and our shoulders are rounded. And in tennis, you would see this all the time. Really poor postures in the young kids, where they're all rounded and the shoulders are slumped and the head's forward. And so I would just say to them, you know, pretend you had a toonie, and I put it between your shoulder blades, and you had to pinch them together to hold that toonie there.
Fixes right away.
Yeah,
I'm just trying it right now as we speak.
Right, it corrects the posture right away. So you're not trying to stand at attention like a guard. You should still be able to freely move your arms and stuff like that, but it just right away activates all the muscles on the back side of the body, which are our lazy muscles, the ones that tend to be on holidays in the tennis player. And then as soon as they can start implementing that postural correction all day long, then we do all kinds of things where we'll teach them how to do rows with a band, okay? You know, little flies like this, where again they're pinching the shoulder blades together with bands, and that definitely can be part of their warm-up, those band exercises. In general, when they do their warm-up at the court, I mean, it's always hard to convince this young age group to really take a significant amount of time to warm up. You know, we all say, and we teach in our coaching levels, that it should be a good 20-minute, 15, 20-minute dynamic warm-up. And rarely is it that. So they need to get there early. That's what we try to educate them and the parents. Get to the courts early. A lot of this stuff can be done off the court. Doesn't have to be done on the court. The coaches, like yourself, don't want to take their court time for 20 minutes having a player warm up. So they need to learn one of the best injury prevention things, and the coaches, I think, do this really well, is they teach their kids how to do a good dynamic warm-up from very young ages.
Yeah, I think it's very important because, like you said, the warm up is not only to get you ready for the effort, on the court. It's really to take care of your body, and to really, like I always say, like you can put in work, you can develop in the warm up. Like if there's, like you're saying, like you can correct your posture by doing certain exercises in the warm up. You're warming up, but you're also doing some correctional work, and like could you also work on other things in the warm up to develop certain things other than
Posture.
Other than posture?
Yeah,
what else can you do?
You can work on like functional dynamic flexibility. Instead of, we all know, I think by this point, that you don't want to have a warm up where you're doing a ton of static stretching.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
But you can be doing like wide lunges, side lunges and stuff like that dynamically, and that's creating a functional flexibility for those muscle groups like your hip flexors and your groin muscles and stuff like that. If anybody's ever done walking lunges, they're tough and they require a certain amount of balance and coordination. So at a young age, these are elements of a developing athlete we want to implement. So not static is like they just have to sit there and stretch, but dynamically they will gain functional flexibility, they'll gain strength through balance, through coordination, and that's really important.
Yeah, that's huge. So let's say they did the warm-up, they went on court, they had a good practice. What are the things that an athlete, even like at a young age, like we're talking 9 to 12, we'll go a little bit higher as we continue the podcast, but 9 to 12, they just finished their practice. What are the things, like the must-do things that they have to do? I mean, we all know this, like, right? Like they have to they have to do their foam rolling and stretching, but if you can like elaborate maybe like why is it important, like from, medical standpoint, like what happens really? Like we all know why, we all know it's important we do that, but why is it important?
Yeah. Well, the first thing they don't want to do, and I saw this a lot, whether it was the end of a training day, the end of a camp day, is the parents come to pick them up and they run out of the building and into the car and off they go. How many times have we seen that?
That's right.
So I think it's like the cool down period, which is like the opposite from the warm-up period, is just as important because it gives your body a chance to start doing what we call recovering. To slow our heart rate and to get our blood flow back to normal and to, grab a little something to eat while maybe we're sitting doing a little bit of stretching or biking or something on the cool down stage to start to put back into our body what we've depleted through the training. As soon as you start training, your muscles are obviously going through like, oh my God, I was just out there running for 2 hours and jumping and hitting and stuff like that. So they just need some time to chill physiologically and start to repair themselves and regenerate. So that's what the graduated stretching does post-practice. Again, not just sitting doing static stretching for 20 minutes, but kind of a dynamic static stretch. And the foam rolling, the same thing, just to, helping with blood flow, helping with a little bit of muscle tightness or soreness and stuff like that can happen right after the workout. Really good recovery using things like stretching and foam rolling and this type of stuff is generally best done on a very serious level for the older player, let's say, certainly with the pros, and they do it quite a while after they finish training, like an hour after or a couple hours after.
Why later?
That's not going to happen with a 12-year-old. It's just not. So the best thing we can do and coaches can do at that age is to at least encourage them to try a little bit of cool down and that before they jump in the car or take off and do whatever they have to do, just like to let their body come to rest a little bit.
Why the pros would do it later?
Because they show physiologically just the way the muscle recovers that it's actually detrimental to just jump into static stretching, you know, shortly after having done an intense workout. They actually show that it actually slows the regeneration and recovery of the muscle fiber as opposed to promoting it. Okay. So in the pro player that's being well monitored by fitness and physio and everything like that, I used to always tell my players full static stretching should be done as your last thing of the day.
Okay.
So after practice, after the gym, after you maybe go for a run or a bike ride or whatever it is you do, it's like hours after, go to dinner, go back to your hotel room or wherever you are, and take a half hour.
Oh, really? So that late? Like it's the last thing before you go to bed, pretty much?
It's the last thing, and it doesn't have to be at 10 o'clock at night, given the schedule. But you don't hit on the tennis court for 2 hours, have a bit of lunch and do some static stretching, and then go hit the gym an hour later. That's not...
That doesn't make sense, yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. So everything during the day should be of a dynamic type of nature. And then in the evening, if you're trying to promote recovery, if you're trying to gain true flexibility of your muscles and lengthen your muscle, you must do static stretching, and that's best done as a real chunk of time and concentration on just those muscle groups.
That's interesting. So how come then we want our kids to stretch right after?
Who are we?
Well, let me back up for a sec, like, because I think you mentioned it in this podcast that like we want to make sure that the kids before they go in the car they do some form of cool down.
Cool down stretch.
Okay, so like how is that different from what the pro would be doing at the end of the day?
It's still quite dynamic, if you know what I mean. It's not like I've seen it before where, everybody finishes training on the court and the coach gets the 5 players over to the side in the grass and they all sit there and, stretch their hamstrings for 5 minutes and their quads. And so you're still doing stretching. The positions of the stretches and that are the same.
Okay.
It just is the length of time you're holding.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit. Now we're getting somewhere. Because I was freaking out for a second because I've been, I've been
doing it wrong.
Exactly. Take my certifications away. So, let's talk a little bit about the time. So let's say for kids, let's go back to the kids after the practice. In your general like club environment, okay? So they come to the practice, they have their 2-hour practice. Before they jump in the car, how long should a kid hold their stretch for?
Well, they should probably do at least a 10-minute cool down type of thing if you're looking at time, because if we tell them to hang around another 20 minutes, they already arrived for their warm-up, it just doesn't happen. Yeah. So if they can take 10 minutes and they can just cover many muscle groups. Like, don't sit there for 10 minutes and only stretch your hamstrings for 30 seconds each stretch for 5 repetitions per leg. Like, stretch your hamstrings 10 seconds, on one leg, 10 seconds on the other, do another muscle group, do another muscle group. Okay, perfect, yes. Okay.
Yes.
Do your, just carry through and do many muscle groups. And often what I see is they do tend to concentrate. Maybe they're tired. They tend to want to come and sit down or lean up against the net and stretch their calves. That's all fine, but try to cover several muscle groups.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Sorry, I had to make sure that it's clear, and because it's two different. It's two different purposes. Like for the kid to really to have a routine and make sure they understand, okay, this is important. We have to take care of our body, and this is what you have to do. Try to cover multiple muscles. And then for a pro, when an athlete is way older and the schedules are different and the efforts are different, it's more about let's get really flexible and let's really work on our muscles. Okay, that makes sense.
Well, do realize as well, when you're looking at 9 to 12-year-olds, having evaluated many of them, and a section of my screening evaluations is always flexibility. rarely will a child fail those tests, right? They're Gumby-like anyway.
That's right.
They're young, they're developing, their muscles are pliable, their joints are super mobile, if not too mobile at this age. So doing a lot of static stretching at that age is not even required.
Yeah.
You know, a lot more dynamic type of stuff. But we want them to learn those patterns and learn those stretches so that moving forward then, oh, now all of a sudden I'm 16, I'm 18, I'm a 24-year-old pro. So we're trying to educate, but reality is get a good warm-up, get a decent cool down, and move on.
That makes sense. What about foam rolling, Marlene?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of foam rolling.
When should you do it for a kid?
When should you start it? What age? Or just
No. Like at what time after the practice? Do you do it before the stretches? Do you do it after the stretches? Do you do it like how long after the practice? Is it the same? I just want to hear your take on it.
Yeah,
at this point, I'm not sure I know anything, you know.
Yeah,
so
I'd
rather double check.
You know what? It depends what your environment is and what you have available, right? What I used to see is a lot of the kids would finish practice and then they're like, okay, you get to the gym because fitness is waiting for you. So they would get to fitness and then that would be part of their fitness in there. They would do some dynamic type cool down stuff and then they would be foam rolling. Foam rolling before any type of training session, when done properly, is good because it helps to get your muscles loosened up, like putty.
It's part of the warm-up.
It's blood flow. It's a warm-up, right. You know, certainly, again, if any athlete you're dealing with has some soreness, you know, or has some what we call muscle knots or trigger points and stuff like that, which all athletes can get with training, then foam rolling will help work that out. And when a muscle is got knots in it or these triggers in it, it won't perform and function like it should in a training situation. So if you've got some soreness heading into practice that day or some knots, you should roll those out before you train. You know,
when you say, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, give yourself the best chance to.
Yeah, that makes sense. When you say when done properly, can you a little bit elaborate on that? Like what is that?
I wish I had some videos.
You can send me those later. We can just put it like over the screen, over the video, you know, like.
No, but you know, like I think the hard part is in this age group is attention span.
Yeah. And
if we said, okay, I think if they had a good session with their fitness coach or a physio or whatever, and they were shown technically, how do you properly foam roll a calf? How do you do a quad? How do you do a hamstring?
I see what you're saying. So it's technically, it's more technically that's what you meant. Okay.
It's more technically correct because you know what I've seen, you've seen it too. They all have their foam roller and they're playing on it.
Yeah.
You know, and they're talking to their buddy and they're they're rolling 1/3 of the muscle.
That's right.
You know, your hamstrings and your quads are large muscles.
Yeah, or 1/3 of the pressure, applying 1/3 of the pressure.
That's what you're going to get with kids, and that's fine because they're in a learning curve, right? So we have to teach them why the muscle is sore, why they might have trigger points in it, what type of pressure we have to get in to alleviate that. But just for general foam rolling, I always thought whatever the kids can do, the kids do. You know, in terms of pressure. It's like we try to introduce as a recovery method to our young people ice baths and ice and cold showers and stuff like that as a recovery thing. And we always started them with, what can you do? Can you do 10 seconds in a cold shower? You know, if you want to do an ice bath, can you last 30 seconds? Can you last a minute? And it's the same thing with foam rolling. I think there's a learning curve, and they certainly get better at it.
I'm happy you mentioned ice bath and cold showers because that was kind of my next question. Like, what other forms of recovery we can do? Not obviously on a like daily basis, but just in general. And you mentioned ice bath. So can you talk a little bit about benefits of ice bath? When should you do that? And how to do it properly.
You want ice bath or recovery in general?
Let's talk about ice bath first, and then we'll talk about the recovery.
Well, it is my experience that in the age group we're talking right now, to introduce ice bath is very difficult. You will get the keener. We all have them. You have the one kid that they're curious, their favorite player they know does it, they want to try it, you know, and so yes, I encourage it, but I never push it at that age group. Like, I don't think in any camp I said, okay, we just trained 5 days, 4 hours a day, and did fitness. Now everyone has to go home and do an ice bath. Like, we never did it that way. Because it does require some supervision. It, you know, obviously can be dangerous if it's not being done right. It's not an easy thing to do right, because what you're going to go home, fill your tub full of cold water. Where are you getting the ice? How much ice do you put in? This type of thing. So in this age group, it's very, very tough. Logistically to get it done. But you can always use ice packs. You know, say you finish your training sessions and your legs are sore. You can put a towel and put a lot of ice in it and wet the towel, and then you can lay those ice towels on your legs or your shoulder, wherever you feel like sore, and just let the ice towel sit for a couple of minutes and take them off. So you're not doing it for like, oh, it's an injury, I have to ice. You're doing it for recovery. Okay. So
what age would you say that it's beneficial to start doing ice baths?
Depending again on the kid and the maturity of the kid and how hard they are training and their ability. I mean, you can enter it. You know, at a young age, like 12 or 13, you can. It'll be short periods of time. But certainly like the 16 to 18 age group I worked with, for sure they were requiring it because they had a lot of training soreness after. And it's good for recovery. But it's one tool. It's one tool.
Yeah.
Right?
So just like last question on ice bath, like can you do it? Like, how safe to do it kind of like at home? I guess my question is like, can a kid do it alone with their parents if they, or it better be like supervised by a professional?
No, they can do it. First of all, I want to say, at any age and with my pros, never are they left alone. Never. Not for a minute. So I had to stand by a lot of ice baths in my career. Okay. You know, men and women. But anyways, never are they left alone because things can happen that obviously are very serious. So with a child, if we were going to enter that into their training routine, then that's something where, say, the professional should meet with the parents and give them guidelines like, you know, I'd fill the tub with cold water, just start with cold water, just have them sit in it just with their legs so they're not fully submersed, right?
Yeah,
That's another whole different level. And have them stay in there a minute and stay with them and then take them out. And then it's like anything, you would graduate up. You don't just like, I'll tell you, this weekend, my husband and I were driving to our ski club to ski for the day. And we're right on Georgian Bay, as you know. And there were all kinds of young people on Saturday morning out doing the polar plunge.
Oh, boy.
And there was ice floating in the bay. And I was like, oh, my God, that's so dangerous. And like, so I don't recommend filling the ice tub full of ice and just jumping in head first and doing the polar plunge. But there is a very scientific, medical, safe way of doing it.
So it's a progression, like
it's
pretty much in every exercise.
100%. But again, big benefits. If you have a kid at 12 that maybe is a little bit more on the mature side developmentally than other kids, so they have more muscle mass, they're growing faster, stuff like that. They complain a lot about being sore after they train. That's someone maybe I would start entering that in. Because then by 14, 16, 18, it's an excellent tool. And any of the players who've been very dedicated to using ice bath properly swear by it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, and have you ever done it?
No. I've done not an ice bath, but I've done like jumping in like a cold, like really cold water. You know, like just like to like, and it's a very refreshing feeling. It's like you're born again.
Yeah.
Like I don't know like how else to describe it, but it's really like you feel alive. Like you feel like you can run a marathon. Like you feel like so full of energy. That's my scientific
and
observation
right there.
A lot
of people are using it now because they're saying it's all these health benefits, and it keeps your skin young, and it keeps, you know, whatever. I can tell you, I think you know, we're avid skiers, and a couple pre-COVID, we were on a big ski trip away, and after 3 days of pounding through powder, I couldn't walk. Literally, I couldn't walk. And it just so happened this hotel we were staying at had a Norwegian outdoor spa area.
Oh my God, those are the best.
And that was the first time I did legit ice baths, because I said, I still have 3 days left of skiing and I can't walk. So I did the hot cold contrast thing.
Yes, I love it.
I'll tell you, miracle.
Yeah.
But was getting from the hot into the ice bath a pleasant experience? No. It wasn't. But it was, like you said, after, felt like $1 million.
Yeah, that's awesome. One question. Because like, what should one wear while doing ice bath? Because I think it's important to mention. Listen, I remember like being like around like parents and just like mentioning stuff, like, because I remember like it was said, I don't remember by who, but like that you have to wear like a swimsuit or some sort of like layer just to make sure that, you know, like you're not being injured or.
That's right.
So.
Well, I could tell you, for serious ice bath goers, males more than females, some of them have like neoprene, you know, wetsuit material type shorts and stuff like that. Otherwise, to protect, you know, frostbite.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, in all the players I worked with, the one area we would often wrap or cover, I had these little caps made, were the toes.
Okay.
It's very, very painful on the feet. And so we would, you know, if I didn't have the little neoprene ice caps for their toes, then we would wrap, like if we were in the hotel, I did many an ice bath in my hotel room for players. And we would just wrap hand towels around their toes. And so when they were submersed, it wasn't as big a shock, and you can do that in other areas as well. But for serious ice bath goers, they usually have a set of like these little protective shorts or stuff like that.
Okay, perfect. I think it was just important to mention, just for
anyone,
you know, listening and thinking like, that's what my child needs right now.
Yeah.
And
right. But the other thing too is realize, and you sometimes see these things posted where, you know, I've seen it online. I do follow some tennis stuff on Instagram, that some of these players, they get in and they're submersed in these ice baths up to here, but that's not what's typical, what you see. You start pretty much just with the legs.
Okay.
You know, and I know Wimbledon has standing ice tubs. You know, so they you know, they're like the tubs we use sort of for the elderly, where you can walk in and close the door and the water fills.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so then the player just stands in the ice tub. Okay, so and they can opt to end that around their butt level, or they can take it to waist level. And a lot of players that I worked with never submersed. They would only do their legs.
Okay.
Full submersion, like when you're laying in an ice tub up to here, is tough. It's very tough.
It's a pro level of ice bathing.
Pro level. So kids,
Yes.
like I said earlier, it's graduated, but for sure just the legs.
Okay. That's good. Before this podcast turns into ice bath podcast, let's maybe talk about some other recovery. And you know, like we're talking already about some more advanced techniques to recover. So typically, that means that we're talking about older players. You know, like you're 13, 14, and like and over, like till 18. Let's say. Let's still focus on juniors. So what are the other forms of recovery that can be beneficial, or injury prevention methods?
Yeah, it's the same thing, but the number one, and this used to always surprise coaches when I would give seminars, but the number one for any age group for recovery is sleep.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. And then what happens is you have to look at the age group you're dealing with, because obviously that 9 to 12 category needs a lot more sleep recovery than the 18-year-old. And
how many hours, like let's break it down. How many hours should like your 9 to 12-year-old
well,
sleep?
you know what? I would have to pull out my charts to be 100% because it's been a couple of years since I've lectured on that specific, and there's specific guidelines.
Yeah.
But I think you're looking at that age group like 10 hours.
Okay.
And I remember in camps when I would lecture on this topic, like none of the kids get that type of sleep.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Especially with the phones these days, you know, it's even worse.
Yeah. And it has to be good sleep, right? And it also has to be, well, if all you can get is 8 hours, then we really looked at having consistent sleep. You know, going to bed, it's a routine, right? Going to bed at the same time, getting up at the same time. And sleep recovery is one of the best things any athlete in any sport can do. And even when an
and it's
athlete,
affordable.
Isn't it? Like, I would be a pro right now based on how much sleep I get. I can't underestimate that enough. So sleep is super important. Hydration is really important for your body to recover. No athlete of any age should ever go to sleep at night and their urine is not clear or pale yellow. And that, again, costs nothing. It's so easy to check.
Yeah, for those of you, sorry, Marlene, for those of you who are listening and not sure what we're talking about, like the darker the color of your urine, the more dehydrated you are. So
that's right.
That's why it's important that it's
right.
clear. That means your body's hydrated.
Right. You don't want to be like totally clear, like water out of the tap clear, because you can also get into trouble with over hydration, but we won't go there because that rarely happens. But it should be pale yellow, and then it's a gradient, right? You look at a stick, it's pale yellow, and it gets darker yellow, orange, to the point you can see like a dark, kind of like dark, vibrant orange. And what's interesting about that is the darker it gets, the more dehydrated you are, okay? The more dehydrated you are, you wake up in the morning dehydrated, you're not recovered. So you're starting your day in terms of training with one of the biggest no-nos for injury prevention, because your muscles aren't recovered. So what's really easy about that is to do a urine check at night before you go to bed, and it's totally reversible. Like, I sat with many of players, some of them I didn't believe, and I'm like, let's go. Like, let's see what color it is right now. You know, because I had some players that were real challenges in terms of not doing their recovery.
Oh, wow.
So I'd be like, let me see. And then I would sit there until they drank 2 liters of water. And they'd be like, well, I don't want to do that because I wake up in the middle of the night to go to the washroom so many times, and then I don't get a good sleep. Well, you should have been working on your hydration throughout the day and through the evening, and not let it all, you know, add up to night.
Yeah.
So
Is there any rule, like, and trying to keep it as maybe as basic as possible, to how much water a child needs to drink?
Oh.
Just to be safe.
Yeah.
You know, just to be like somewhat in that
Well,
area.
I can tell you, I don't know if I can give you a set amount, okay? But what I can say about child, that age group, is that they should be using primarily water to recover.
Okay, that's a big one, yeah.
I'm
glad you mentioned that.
I would see a lot of kids in our camp walk in with 3-4 Gatorade bottles or Powerade bottles.
Because that's what the cool kids do, right, on the TV.
Yeah,
exactly.
The cooler ones even have the energy drinks.
Yeah.
Don't get me started. But kids that age can recover very well with water. And, you know, throughout their day in their life than drinking wholesome fluids, you know, like sugar-free juices, like natural juices, milk, but not Cokes and colas or whatever, not these energy drinks.
Vitamin water.
But I was just going to say that. Vitamin water,
Yes.
oxygen water, it's water. Like, just use water.
Yeah.
And we used to have a guideline where in that age group, we wouldn't even recommend Gatorade unless they were competing, and they were competing for at least an hour.
That's right. And especially like in hot environments where you're sweating a lot, you know, when you're really losing a lot of liquid and you're really losing those electrolytes and you need to replenish them. That makes sense. But even then, Marlene, correct me if I'm wrong, because I still remember that. But you know, who knows my memory, you know. But it's still, you're not chugging out of, like, you open your Gatorade, you're still not chugging, it's diluted.
That's right.
Correct? So it's not just like out of the water, out of the bottle. So you want to make sure you dilute it, because it's highly concentrated in sugar.
Sugar, right.
That's right.
And the perfect example, if you want to emulate somebody, is someone like Nadal, because he makes his drinking such a thing.
Yeah.
You know, you can watch him go over, open the bottle, have some water, put it down. We all know what he's like. Put it down. Take the other bottle, which is his electrolyte, and take that. And Djokovic, the same thing. They're very methodical about here's this and here's that, and they take a couple of swigs out of, you know, both, and then they move on. You never, at the pro level, you would never see a player walk out on court with, like, a Powerade bottle. Well, they probably couldn't because they're not sponsored by Powerade, but you know, they have their own formulas. But for our kids, then using a product like Gatorade is fine, but just like you said.
Is there
coconut water.
Okay, is there a formula for kids that kids could use, you know, like is there, I mean, what I'm saying is, like, is there something they can do at home to make sure it's, you know, it's a proper drink for them? Like, is there something like we can suggest? Like, I remember hearing something like you would have, like, you have a water bottle, like I have 1 liter Smart bottle, let's say, and then you would have this much water, like your, you know, like 70% water, then you would have 30% orange juice or like your Gatorade, and then you would add some salt into it. That's what I heard. I don't remember from who. Could have been you. I don't know.
No,
could be you. No.
Well, I think it's because you have to look at why you're maybe using the Gatorade, because it does have electrolytes in it. So if you really super dilute it, then it's really having no effect for you. Do you know what I mean? If you're really, really super diluting it. So I think our guidelines were mainly, now I had the benefit of working with some very top nutritionists as well, and I remember some of the things they used to teach us. But, you know, to again have a couple of gulps of your pure water in a changeover and a gulp or two of your pure Gatorade. Okay. I know for sure the last nutritionist I worked with in our U12 camp, who was outstanding, was very against children using those, like, vitamin waters. Yeah, very against it, because there's vitamins in them. And the thing with Gatorade for kids, they are highly sugar-based. So we have to think of, you know, their teeth, and, like, there's so many other things that we think about. But I can't give you a formula like 2/3, 1/3.
Yeah, okay.
I would be guessing.
No, for sure. And I think it's also, like, individual at some point. It becomes, like, you know, like, you have to be careful with things like this. But just to be safe, everybody, water is your best friend.
Water in that age group, you can't go wrong. You can go wrong by starting out in a training session and a match with just Gatorade. Okay, like, sometimes I saw kids, you know, for sure come out, they didn't have a water thing, they just had Gatorade. You know, undiluted.
That's not right. In Canada, indoors, you know, like during winter, it's like, come on.
And how much do kids, like, really sweat, right, in comparison to the pros? Like, really. So they're not losing typically as much as you would see grown players losing. So, they're not having to change their shirt every couple of games, and so they're not depleting as much. But again, it's a good practice to get into to teach them, how to do the couple of swigs of water, one little swig of Gatorade, and get into that habit.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
You talked about sleep, and the importance of hitting like certain amount of hours for kids. What happens if you don't sleep? Because you don't feel it right away.
Right.
Like it's kind of like it's a compound effect where it's like, whatever, today's 8 hours, how do you, long term, if you're not getting enough sleep, what are the consequences?
Well, there's, the bottom line is your body as a whole, not just your muscles, but your body as a whole, and that is your brain as well, aren't recovered. They're not recovering. They're not alert. They're not. So your cognition can change. Your behavior can change. Your decision-making processes can change. Certainly, the kids probably won't notice as much, but over time, because your muscles and your body as a whole, your organs, etc., haven't fully recovered because they haven't got the sleep and hydration to do that, it compounds, right? And then all of a sudden you have a 12-year-old with a devastating injury. Like, well, where did that come from? It's because it's been building up, because they haven't recovered over time, and they are sleep deprived.
Wow.
So we break down these issues, like we break them down into physiological and psychological categories, because you see athletes that aren't recovered and edging on overtrained, just in all categories, just starting to fail. They're injured, they're falling apart, they're irritable, they're, you've dealt with them, I'm sure. Their grades are falling in school. Socially, they're just depleted.
Yeah, it's fascinating that, a simple thing that in everyone's control, really, all of it is in our control, but it's just so basic, and it's free, and it doesn't require, that much effort, really. It's more, like having that discipline, but it can have such huge effect on not just your game, like your life. Forget game.
Yeah,
it's like
your life,
your health, your life, really. Wow.
It's not sport specific, Bogdan, right?
Yeah, that's right.
You could be doing this podcast to skiers or skaters or hockey players, any other elite athlete, and that's still going to come back as the number one recovery tool. It's like sleeping and what you put in your body. Okay, the stretching and the ice baths and the physio and all that is great, but to me, it's always secondary to those other tools, because that's what's nourishing your muscles, your nerves, your arteries, your bones, your organs, your heart, right? It's the fluids, the sleep, the proper food, the proper nutrition. That's what, it's like they're race cars. Yeah. They're Formula One race cars, and what you put in that body, okay, is what you're going to get out of it at the end of the day.
Yeah, and listen, we're like 53 minutes into our podcast, and we're talking about recovery for like a vast majority of this time, and I really hope that the message is clear here, that it's not just about, going on court and hitting certain amount of balls and, the rest of, like you have to take care of your body. You have to make sure that there's proper, hours that your child is sleeping. There's you have to do that stretching. You have to do those foam rolling sessions. You have to really take care and treat your child as an elite car, and not your, Honda Civic, where you can just abuse it and it's gonna work, but it's never will perform to the standards that you really want your child to perform. So I think this is fantastic. And we talked about, like I said, many techniques that you can use to really improve your body. But is there anything that you will want to add? Is there anything that we're missing?
Let me just say just a little bit, and you're right, we could go on and on. When I taught the level 2, level 3 coaching certification programs, we spent a day on recovery. And these are with, level 2, level 3 coaches. They already are out there and know quite a bit. Like, we spent massive amounts of time on all the recovery principles. And so, yes, there is a lot, and it's important. And I often say that players, like, sometimes they set themselves apart from other players because sometimes there's not a lot of technical difference with a couple of players, if you know what I mean, at different levels. There's not a lot of So what made that difference at the end of the day? Why can someone like Nadal and Federer and Djokovic and Andy Murray yesterday, if you saw the match?
Yeah, fantastic. What an effort. Wow.
At 35 plus, why can they play this many matches and pop back the next day and do it again and are still the all-time number ones in terms of Grand Slam titles? And you know how many matches they have to win a Grand Slam. It's because their regeneration and recovery is superior to everybody else.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
Like, I think it's also like a big part of it is just obviously they have like tremendous team behind them, and there's like their like schedule, it's like just like it's just on another level. I cannot even find words to describe that. But it's also like discipline, and I think it's important that all our listeners and parents and coaches and hopefully kids maybe even understand that it starts from a young age, and it starts from as simple things as just like adding your small warm-up before your session, adding your stretching. It's not a lot, but that's how you get to the point where like you're doing your half an hour stretches before you do sit. So it's a long journey. Like we always like to say, it's a journey, and it starts now. Like for some of you guys, that are really young, and for the parents who are listening, it starts now, and it's important that we're not neglecting it, and we find time for it, and and nothing's gonna happen if we're allocating extra time to really nurture that, because I think it's paramount.
It's baby steps, right?
Exactly.
They're not going to do all of this all at once.
Exactly.
It's baby steps and building and not taking out those foundations. Again, we were very privileged at Tennis Canada to have, a U12 program where 3 weeks a year, you're talking about teams, 3 weeks a year, we take these 20 kids and we put them in one center with a doctor, a top doctor, in the field, a physio, a fitness coach, a nutritionist, a sports psychologist, and then all the coaches. And we have 5-day camps, and each day, court and gym were one thing. They attended lectures every day on something. And so it was just building those blocks. Very privileged kids to have that opportunity, but no reason why parents and coaches in the general tennis community, recreation tennis clubs and all that type of stuff, can't take those building blocks and start them out.
No, 100%. Listen, it's so important that we do that, and I'm happy you're mentioning all this. It's listen. We can talk about these things for hours, especially with your expertise and knowledge, and your passion about it. Because I want to finish this conversation with your words, maybe of advice. If you could say something to parents, to tennis parents in particular, that maybe they would do something differently, better, continue doing what they're doing great. Just like some words, maybe for coaches if you want, because who knows, maybe there's something there.
Well, you're right, because some of it comes down to some of the coaching. What my advice to this age group, coaches, parents, and that is to really ensure at the end of the day you're building a good kid. A happy kid, a good citizen of our community, and tennis and any sport is just that. It's a sport. We can work at it really hard and we can do the right things, but please have fun. You know, I saw so many kids that weren't having fun. I saw a lot of parents that weren't having fun. If I could give them any recommendations, would be like they shouldn't be doing training 7 days a week. There should be 1 day a week where these kids have nothing to do with tennis or whatever their chosen sport is. So that doesn't mean they can't go out on that day and go swimming with their friends or play baseball or frisbee or bike ride or whatever they want to do. But 1 day a week, they should not be anywhere near tennis courts, nowhere near a fitness gym, and no, they shouldn't be sitting at home with their parents watching videotapes of their last match. It should be like no tennis. And that mentally and physically is one of the best things in developing a young athlete in any sport. And the other thing, and I'm a strong believer in this, and I did quite a few seminars with parents where it was a very controversial topic. But I really believe kids in this age group should be doing other sports. You know, and that doesn't mean competitively. That just means it's a shame that I saw so many kids pulled out of phys ed class because the parents didn't think it was a good idea that they do that. That they couldn't go and just recreationally play basketball in the park or volleyball in the park for fear that they might get hurt or it's going to make them tired and then they won't be able to perform at the tennis court. I saw that more than I can tell you, and it was heartbreaking. You know, because there's a lot of kids, they're at a high level of tennis, they're generally good athletes. And some of them are great athletes in other sports, but they aren't just being allowed or encouraged to do that. So I think for the overall growth, like I said, as an athlete and as a person, it's so important. And there's tons of research that shows that the overall development of the child's body is better when they do other sports. You know, they create balance and coordination and flexibility at differently than an athlete that only does one sport all the time. And in terms of injury prevention, it's key. Because you're using, you know, your muscles in different ways. It's the same muscles, because haven't we all heard, well, oh, I used different muscles today when I went skiing than I did playing tennis. They're the same muscles. They're just working in different ways. They're working in different directions, okay? They're working high to low. And I think that's really important in injury prevention and overall development. So for parents, that's what I would say. Just realize at the end of the day, kids have to have fun, and they can do it the right way, and never be afraid to ask for help. We have so many good coaches in Canada, in Toronto. I'm one of many outstanding physios in this city, okay? I just happen to specialize in tennis. But that doesn't mean they can't get advice from a physio that maybe does a different sport. You know, the principles are the same.
Marlene, these are like honestly golden words. If I could print those out and put it on a T-shirt, I would definitely, because those are great, you know, statements that you made, and I really hope that it resonates with all our listeners today. Marlene, I would like to thank you for joining me today, and you know, finding time in your busy schedule to talk about these things. And I wish you nothing but the best. Have fun, enjoy the rest of your day, and again, thank you for coming.
Well, thank you so much, Bogdan. Thanks for having me, and my pleasure to share my 30 years of knowledge.
Awesome, Marlene. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.